So I'm always on the hunt for different allergy supporting herbal medicines, and that's because in the Byron Herbalist Clinic I treat a ton of very allergic, histamine intolerant, very reactive patients, whether they're dealing with mold exposure, whether they're dealing with gut infections, whether they're dealing with histamine intolerance or seasonal allergies, whatever it is, I treat a ton of them. And the big piece when I'm onboarding a new patient and say they've been chronically unwell for 5, 10, 15 years and they've done all the frontline therapies, the second line therapies, the third line therapies, you've got to have that next step, that next option. So I kind of picture this little Rolodex in my head and I'm always going through different options, different recommendations specific for the patient that I'm working with. And so here I need to have an alternative approach because whatever they've done hasn't worked. I mean, if frontline therapies haven't been explored, great. Let's just use the things that are freely available, that are quite affordable, and that work for most people. But when we don't see those results, then these second line therapies, or maybe these more advanced therapies, or these more specialized therapies can really help. So before we jump into the herbs, I just wanted to cover some of the really common symptoms that would make me suspect that histamine intolerance or allergies might be at play, because you might not know. This might be new to you, you might know, who knows? Let's cover it. So the really big one that is common, they don't all have to be here. You might not have 3/4 of these, but a couple of them, yeah, for sure. This is me, big time. The big ones there would be sinus congestion, runny nose, itchy eyes, itchy skin. The other really big ones there would be skin involvements, whether that's hives or dermatitis or eczema, any chronic persistent skin issue. I would be suspecting allergies or histamine intolerance. It's a possibility. And then we get some more chronic, more serious presentations here. More advanced, more significant, more of that kind of histamine overload that's quite high. And that would be things like dizziness and vertigo and ear ringing, tinnitus, whatever you want to call it. Tissue swelling is really big as well. So I often picture the turbinates in the sinus cavities being swollen. That often contributes to that kind of boggy sinus, can't breathe through the nose properly. That's all congested, but you're not kind of producing any mucus. It's a form of tissue swelling, but it can be global. It can be, anywhere in the body. And then the other big one that's not common, but I do see it, and I do suspect histamines and allergies at play. And that would be this kind of red face, almost like you've been sunburned, but you haven't spent any time in the sun. So the two herbs I wanted to share with you today are number 1, Perilla, and number 2, Albizia. Perilla leaf and Albizia bark. So Perilla leaf is this really, really beautiful herb. We're talking about its antihistamine properties. It can actually reduce serum IgE and histamine and also tumor necrosis factor alpha. So what does all that mean? Now these are players in that allergic cascade. They either trigger mast cells, which are these little reservoirs that kind of hold on to all these inflammatory messenger molecules. And when something triggers them, they release them into the body to resolve whatever triggered them, where that antigen was. So this can stabilize that and decrease those triggers, the IgE, or they are a consequence of that allergic cascade, something like tumor necrosis factor alpha. It's this major pro-inflammatory messenger molecule that kind of stimulates inflammation in the body. And so the really big piece there is Perilla has been shown to stabilize mast cells and reduce histamine and that pro-inflammatory cytokine kind of release. And the really big piece there is that's immune mediated. So mast cells are involved in the immune system and that immune response, and just telling your immune system just to calm down because it's trying to resolve something. telling the immune system to calm down so that you can feel better and improve some of those symptoms we covered, if that's what you're experiencing. And then from there, we have to go to work and deal with what is driving that immune system dysregulation. So Perilla is not going to do that, but it is going to help calm that system down and get you feeling better so that you can actually get better. And so here, I'm just absolutely obsessed with mast cells. I'm going to be covering a lot more about mast cells. And I actually think that for most of my patients that are presenting with chronic allergy or histamine intolerance or these persistent allergic-like symptoms, I actually suspect that mast cells are involved until proven otherwise. Doesn't mean they're always involved, but they are a major player in those symptoms, those chronic symptoms. If it's acute, it kind of comes and goes, if you've only had it for a week, probably not. But if this is something that you've been dealing with for months upon months, if not years, I would be suspecting mast cells until proven otherwise. And the thing that would prove it otherwise for me, in my practice, would be not responding to therapies that calm down mast cells and result in improvements in the majority of patients that I work with. And so I think this paper really outlines some interesting pieces on mast cells. Mast cells have been recognized for their participation in allergic reactions as well as in inflammatory processes based on their ability to secrete numerous cytokines, chemokines, and preformed mediators such as histamine. When mast cells are activated by allergens bound to IgE on the cell surface, they release histamine and mast cell granule proteins, as well as a wide variety of pro-inflammatory mediators such as interleukins. They may exacerbate allergic diseases. So we're really thinking about this kind of nexus point where when they get stimulated, they can exacerbate or trigger or cause these symptoms that you're dealing with. And so calming them down is huge. And so this paper goes on. These mediators affect nerve, muscle, and endothelial cells and induce itching, contraction, vasodilation, and edema. Notably, modulation of mast cell cytokine production can provide a useful therapeutic strategy for allergic inflammatory diseases. And then they just give some examples: atopic dermatitis, allergic asthma, and allergic rhinitis. Now, that study that little excerpt came from was actually looking at luteolin, which they extracted from Perilla, which is this flavonoid that has pretty potent mast cell stabilizing effects. It's pretty hard to get your hands on. I mean, you can look hard, you can find it, and sometimes it's expensive. I turned to quercetin a little bit sooner because it's more widely available and it's more affordable, but luteolin is actually found in Perilla, so it's a little bit easier to access for me in my clinic. I have a good source, really high quality source, and I get really good results with histamine-mediated conditions, working as that antihistamine mast cell stabilizer and help supporting that kind of allergy axis. So I've talked about Perilla before, and the second herb that I wanted to share today is new to the practice. I've been using it for about 6 or 12 months, and it is called Albizia. It's actually Albizia bark. And again, this one comes to me through Chinese medicine. It's also used in Ayurveda. And in Chinese medicine, they say it nourishes the heart and calms the spirit. I mean, that sounds amazing. Who doesn't need a bit of that? Now, my main experience with Albizia, and I think experience goes a long way. You can read all the studies you want that say that one herb does one thing. To me, results matter. And so if I apply a therapy that has rave reviews in the literature and it doesn't do what it's kind of supposed to, what the science says it should, I'll drop it pretty quick. Like, I need results, and my patients are coming to me because they need results. And so I will use herbs and develop kind of an affinity and a preference for approaches that get results. And Albizia, to me, is again new. And what I've been using Albizia, and I've been getting pretty decent results in the right patient, this is all holistic, it's going to be specific for the right patient, is I've been actually grinding it down to a powder and dispensing it as a raw herb for the most sensitive, histamine intolerant and reactive patients that I work with. Why would I do that? Most of the time, we're working with herbal tinctures, and we process most of our herbal tinctures in the clinic from raw herbs. So why wouldn't we just turn Albizia into a tincture, and then you can dispense it easier and it stores longer and it's a lot less of a hassle. And the reason I will do that, but the reason I've been using Albizia in a raw herb form, basically just ground powder, decocted or infused into boiling water, strained and consumed, is because the most reactive, histamine intolerant, allergic patient does not tolerate herbal tinctures. And the reason there, and this is a theory, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, is because the herbal tinctures have a small amount of alcohol in them that helps extract those constituents and also preserves them. So it's very convenient, it's easy to dispense, it's easy to store, you don't have to fiddle around with the actual herb, but you're also getting the whole herbal kind of goodness, all of the different constituents, not just one extract. And so even a very small shot of this alcohol water herbal tincture can set off the most allergic patients. So we have to go for these raw herbs, and that's how I've been dispensing Albizia. And I have been getting really, really good results in these hyper-allergic patients. Again, just trying to calm down the immune system so we can stabilize that person, so we can get them feeling better, even if we haven't dealt with why they're reactive. I call it kind of like the chill pill for the immune system. So there's 3 big pieces with Albizia on histamine intolerance and allergy, and the data that we have shows that it can inhibit histamine 1 receptors and histidine decarboxylase gene transcription. What the heck does that mean? Histamine 1 receptors, that's a pretty easy one. Histamine 1 receptors are considered one of the top kind of involved receptors in histamine intolerance. We have histamine 1 receptors throughout our body, and when you have excessive histamine in the body, they are triggering that histamine 1 receptor to get a response, right? That's the kind of lock and key result that leads to all the symptoms that you're dealing with. And so the big headline here, and this is something I want you to do if this is you, is if you're taking an antihistamine over-the-counter medicine, go and type that name into Google and then type in mechanism of action, and I can almost guarantee you, not all drugs do this, but most antihistamines that you get over the counter are H1 blockers. So Albizia is a natural H1 blocker. Now, histidine decarboxylase suppression is a little bit more technical. We've got this enzyme, histidine decarboxylase, which converts histidine into histamine in the body. And so if we can downregulate or suppress that or slow that enzyme down, then we can decrease the amount of that histamine pool that we have in the body. Now, the biggest piece here, and I might sound like a broken record, is that none of these herbs are going to cure the why. These anti-allergy or antihistamine herbs are just to buy us time, get you feeling better so that you can actually get to work to get better. It will decrease that histamine pool. It will decrease the effects of histamine on the body, blocking that receptor, but it won't deal with why. And again, sometimes when you stabilize, because again, Albizia is also a mast cell stabilizer, and instead of going through the luteolin side of things, that flavonoid side of things, Albizia focuses mainly, most of the research is on catechin. I mean, I'm sure there's other things in Albizia that stabilizes the mast cells, but again, catechin is another polyphenol, so there's a little bit of a theme here. Luteolin, quercetin, catechin, all these polyphenols stabilize mast cells so that they stop triggering at the drop of a hat and releasing or flooding your body full of these pro-inflammatory, allergy stimulating byproducts like histamine. So those are two novel herbs that I'll use frequently with histamine intolerant patients, with allergic patients, with patients who are dealing with a lot of those symptoms, blocked noses, headaches, irritability, heart involvement, skin involvement. It's a big picture. And again, they're just going to calm the system so we can get a bit of time, so we can get you feeling better, so that we can actually go to work on finding what's actually driving that. Is it leaky gut? Is it bacterial dysbiosis? Is it candida? Is it mold exposure? Have you got a heavy metal overload? All these things can be more fuel on the fire for that immune system to get dysregulated and leave you in this chronic state of that allergic histamine intolerant presentation. So again, these herbs can help calm you down. Definitely work with a trained herbalist here, because they aren't hard to use, but they have to be customized to your presentation. And if you got anything out of it, like, comment, and subscribe below. And if you're in Australia or New Zealand and you think you might benefit from some of these herbs, then you can book a consult in the link below. And for everyone else, we are working hard behind the scenes to put together a little catalog of courses, almost like DIY, so you can either take that to your practitioner or kind of glean some of the tools that might be appropriate for you to support your health and help get you better. All right, we'll see you in the next video.